So, Josh, did we meet in Vegas? Is that where this all started?
No, we actually met in Anchorage, Alaska. You were up there on the USO tour.
That's right. Vegas was after that.
Yeah, it was just after that. And it was funny. You know, this email comes out. It's like, hey, we need somebody to volunteer to give some country music artist people a tour as part of the USO tour. And I was like, well, I love country music. Yes, I'll do that. Had no idea who it was. And they're like, oh, it's this guy named Granger Smith. He's here for the USO tour. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You know, so my roommate from the Air Force Academy is from Texas, from Sugar Land, Texas. And he obviously loves Texas country music, red dirt music, all that stuff. So I just kind of got indoctrinated into that in college.
Yeah.
And growing up, my first CD that I got as a gift was like a Christmas stocking stuffer. It was Clay Walker's like self-titled 1993 album.
Oh yeah.
And you know, so I loved country music growing up, and then I started learning about Texas music more and fell in love with it. And then obviously when I heard it was you, it was really cool, you know, and we did that. And then you were there for NFR in Vegas after that when I was down there as well.
That's right. So I went up there. It was for CMT, right?
Oh, it's
in
CMT.
Anchorage.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was for CMT, but it was connected to the USO.
Okay.
It was a USO CMT, and I was with Cody Allen.
Yep.
You remember that?
Yep.
Which is, you know, my predecessor at After Midnight. That's the interesting connection with us. But when I met you, and still to this day, you are probably top 3 coolest guys in my phone that I know that I could text, because you are a fighter pilot, and not only a fighter pilot, but an F-22, which is that's the most sophisticated aircraft in the world, right?
And yeah, in terms of maneuverability, speed, all the performance numbers you can think of, it's definitely the top out there right now. So yeah, it's
anybody in Russia have anything better than that?
I think they're trying real hard, but
China, nobody has anything better than that.
They're trying, but I think the F-22, you know, without getting into specifics, I would just simply say that I would take an F-22 to combat against anything out there in the skies.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long have we've been recording? Only 2 minutes, and I'm already saying this Top Gun. Sorry, we're bringing it up. The newer one.
Yeah.
The Russian jet that's in that.
Yep.
It's like everyone's in awe about that. Where's the F-22 stack up against that?
I still think in terms of capabilities, it's better. You know, Russia is definitely producing stuff.
What is that plane in Top Gun?
Su-57, I believe, is what they had in there. And then, if I recall correctly, I watched it I watched it twice now, but I think Su-57 is what they had in there, and that's like their next generation stealth kind of equivalent fighter. They haven't produced a whole lot of them, and they just don't have the capacity, and the tech development I think is still lacking. So we still retain a really nice advantage in terms of just manufacturing processes, the intellectual aspect of making these airplanes really lethal and survivable. So yeah, the F-22 is just, in my opinion, pretty awesome.
When did you stop flying combat missions?
So I stopped. My last deployment was in 2016, and then I did the demonstration team job for 3 years. I think the last time I saw you was in 2021, I believe, when we came out to the ranch.
Yeah.
And then I left active duty in August of 2023. So I left active duty. Now I'm part-time in the Nevada Air National Guard. No longer flying fighter jets, but still flying lots of other airplanes. And so it was kind of my time in the Air Force. Did a deployment in the F-15 first, and then the F-22 later on.
It's like I said, one of the coolest guys I know.
No, you know, I do want to, since we were talking about Anchorage and talking about the CMT tour and all that stuff, you know, I think the reason that we connected later on in Vegas was honestly because you were incredibly kind. And I don't remember if you know this, or I don't know if you remember this at all, but the day after the day you left, that morning, I think it was, we had like a 7.2 magnitude earthquake in Anchorage.
I remember that. I
was at work, you know, we just finished awesome time, got to show you around the airplanes, get to listen to you play and all that stuff. And then the next morning I'm at work, we get an earthquake happening, and I was like, all right, well, this, you know, it's like, oh, it's an earthquake, no big deal. And then we start getting like tossed from chairs, and we're like, oh, this is a serious one, you know? And you had landed, I'm not sure if you came back to Texas. Okay, Seattle. And you text me, and you're like, hey, man, I heard there's a really big earthquake. Are you doing okay? And I was like, this is the guy that I used to listen to on my computer in college, you know, when like a little you like came out like back in the day, Granger Smith. And I was like, this is this guy texting my personal number, asking if I'm okay because of an earthquake that just happened. You know, I'm like, how many other millions of things do you have going on? And the fact that you were so kind to take time just to ask how I was doing after that was amazing. And then I was like, well, I'm doing well, but I'm heading out of town. I'm going to Vegas because we got this conference. You're like, well, I'm going to Vegas, and then we met up there for the show, which was great. And it was just all through your kindness. And that's how this is all kind of
doesn't seem
unfolded.
like a big deal at all, though. I mean,
it doesn't, but you'd imagine it's just like, hey, taking care of other people, being kind and considerate, sadly is not as common as I guess you would expect. And especially when it's like somebody you've been listening to on the radio for the last, 15 years, you're like, oh, that's pretty crazy. Like, I just text my personal cell phone number,
I remember that. That was wild because we took off from Anchorage on a flight to, I guess it was like, maybe Delta, but we landed in Seattle and right when we landed and turned our phones on, it was like, our phones were blowing up.
Yeah.
There was a major earthquake in Anchorage within the short amount of time we were in the air. If we had waited any longer to take off, that they weren't flying planes out of that airfield for a while after that. So I was like, man, is Josh okay? So that was a little crazy incident. I actually totally forgot about it. So you mentioned it, but the time itself in Anchorage was my first time to see you and the F-22, and you let us walk around it. Have you seen that, Ant? Have you seen? Oh, well, after this, I'll show you, like, when he was on the demo team, some of those videos, like their Instagram account, what's that Instagram, F-22 demo team?
Yeah, F-22 demo team.
Demo team. That is a good follow on Instagram.
Yeah.
Because that aircraft does things that just the mind is not capable of understanding what it's seeing. It looks like some kind of CGI. It looks fake. I mean, they basically tell us it basically stalls in the air. Yep. And could reverse and go a different direction. Like, what's happening with the F-22?
Just wizardry. I don't know.
It's basically wizardry.
Yeah, it's wizardry. It's a testament, right, to all the engineers and folks that designed the airplane, because they did a phenomenal job with the flight control laws and how to make that airplane do some amazing things. The things that really make it unique and different in terms of maneuverability, the engines are remarkable. So they produce 70,000 pounds of thrust total. The airplane, full of gas, full of weapons, weighs about 65,000 pounds. So even at takeoff, you're producing more thrust than than you weigh at takeoff. So you can accelerate going straight up.
It's a little bit more than a tour bus, by the way, weighted down.
Yeah, maybe not as much as a Duramax. I don't know, but it's close. I've got a Cummins diesel, but it's close.
I'm not talking about thrust. I'm talking about the weight of a fully weighed down tour bus is about 65.
Okay, wow. Yeah. I didn't realize it was that heavy.
Yeah.
So this, but the airplane, the engines produce amazing thrust, but also on the back we have vectored thrust. They have nozzles in the back. So imagine taking your finger, putting on a water hose, and like moving your thumb and the water goes different directions.
Yeah.
But you're just doing that with 70,000 pounds of thrust.
Oh, yeah.
So you have vector thrust. The flight controls are all basically, it's fly-by-wire. So I'm making inputs. I'm moving the stick or moving the throttles. And the airplane says, okay, the pilot wants XYZ effect, whatever it happens to be. And then it figures out how fast am I going, how high am I, all these other parameters, and gives me the combination of flight controls I need to get the effect I'm asking for. And you've seen the Thunderbirds fly, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So they have F-16s, amazing airplanes. To put it in perspective of size, the F-22, the tails in the back are the same size as the F-16 main wing. So these are massive surfaces. Have you ever gone skydiving?
No.
Okay. So skydiving, when you're falling through the sky, you're basically using your hands and feet to like deflect air.
Okay.
And that's what the F-22 does is it's in that post-stall regime where it's no longer like flying. It's not producing enough lift to overcome the weight of the airplane. It's basically using those flight control surfaces that are the same size as an F-16 main wing to deflect air like you would be skydiving. And that's what allows it to be, completely controllable even in those regimes where it's stalled.
Tell me about the bottom of that aircraft too.
Which portion? Oh yeah, where the bays are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a chance to look in the bays.
That's wild stuff under there,
we carry missiles, combination of bombs down there, and the doors will open up really quickly. The missiles or weapons will kick out of the bottom of the airplane, then close back up to keep us stealthy. So having those weapons or missiles or bombs,
nothing's hanging out. Like the F-16 has stuff everywhere underneath it.
Yeah, and everything's carried internally for the F-22, and just like the F-35. So the F-35 is kind of the F-16 replacement, much like the F-22 is the F-15 replacement, and everything's carried internally to keep us stealthy so we can sneak around, and When you think about other airplanes out there flying that aren't stealthy, that's where those airplanes really shine. Because imagine, you're a bad guy airplane and you see on your radar, or look outside and you see these things popping up because they have really big radar cross sections, and you get very attracted. It's like, a moth to a flame kind of thing. And then you have these airplanes that are very stealthy. You're like ninjas just rolling around with ninja stars, so it's pretty great. Pretty amazing capability for sure.
I mean, would you ever just pinch yourself? I mean, yeah, surely. How fast would they fly top speed that you could go?
Yeah, I've gone twice the speed of sound, so it's about 1,500 miles an hour.
So you're in the middle of the desert somewhere or over an ocean going that. I mean, are you ever just like, wow, I'm the fastest man on earth right now?
Yeah, like
you probably didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, there's like, the SR-71 was faster, right? And there were airplanes that were faster, but I mean, twice the speed of sound is pretty fast. And then you're doing that at, 60,000 feet roughly. And that's it. It's interesting because at that point, there's a lot of heat, right? So you're going through the air really quickly, and there's a lot of heat that's generated from that, from the friction. And as a result, the airplane's trying to cool itself off too, because it's getting hot and wants to keep everything electronically and the skin and everything cool. So you get some cutback actually, where it gets very quiet because they're diverting air to other things that are more important than you probably as the pilot, and to keep it flying and all those things. And it's really eerie. You're at 60,000 feet going twice the speed of sound, 1,500 miles an hour roughly. And it gets really quiet, and you're just seeing like the earth rotate underneath you, and you're like, this is super trippy. It's just, it's a pretty cool feeling for sure.
That's unbelievable.
About 60,000
60,000 feet up.
Yeah.
Twice where we fly.
Yeah.
Commercial.
Yeah, roughly.
Oh, that is unbelievable.
And we go supersonic, obviously if we needed to in combat, but in our training airspaces, when we need to do it for training, we aren't allowed to go supersonic over the domestic U.S. For going from point to point. However, I did get approved one time by the FAA. I was flying out of North Dakota, taking a jet to Salt Lake City. And the Thunderbirds were actually performing. I flew a jet into an air show, and I wasn't the demo pilot at the time. I was just bringing a jet there to talk to folks about the airplane. And Thunderbirds were a little bit delayed taking off and finishing their show. So I get delayed taking off out of there. I take off. I light the afterburners. I rip up, and I'm going to Salt Lake. And I'm looking at the time. I'm going to be late. And the people this is on a Sunday.
Okay.
I'm going to be late. And the people that were working there, they're all contract employees, that are civilians coming in on a Sunday to get this airplane. They're like, hey man, we close at 5. And I'm looking at the time, like, man, I'm going to be late. Feel bad, and so I asked the air traffic control guy, I was like, hey, I come over to North Dakota right now. There's nobody down there. Do you mind if I go supersonic? And he's like, oh, what do you want? And I was like, 1.2. So 1.2 times speed of sound. He's like, yeah, approved. So I go to I go to 1.2 for about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. Then he comes back on the radio and he's like, yeah, my supervisor saw what we were doing and he said we couldn't do it anymore. I was like, okay. Okay, all right. So I slowed back down. It did help me catch up a little bit of time, but it was pretty funny because that was the one time I was legally allowed to go supersonic over the States, and they were all on board until they weren't.
So how far was the trip total, time-wise?
I think it was about an hour and a half, if I recall correctly. Yeah.
That's still a long time in the cockpit.
Yeah, it is. I've done 12-hour flights in the Raptor and the Eagle, and it's a long time to be in that airplane for that long. But you also get, you get used to it. I'm a average height build kind of guy, 5'10", and you get comfortable in there. And also there's some cool things you can do in terms of you're never flying by yourself, right? You're flying with a wingman, you're flying with somebody else.
Yeah.
So you'll have fun games to play crosswords and whatever else back and forth if you're just not doing anything going on,
So I want to get to, because I know that there's some stories that you and I have shared.
Yeah.
And part of it has to do with passing time there. But before we get to that, there was, you remember you guys put me in that flight suit?
Yep.
In Anchorage. Yeah. And it's like that, it controls the G's for, what is that suit called?
Just called a G suit.
G-suit.
The one you had on was called an A-tags, which is the advanced something G garment. Effectively that one's really nice because it's one bladder. So it's a bladder of air that goes around your abdomen, your legs, and your calves. And what it's designed to do is take air from the airplane as you're pulling G's, inflates to squeeze your legs, and that allows your upper body to keep the blood flow and oxygen that your heart and lungs need and your brain needs to stay conscious. When you're flying and fighting with these airplanes. So yeah, you put that on, you put the survival vest on, the harness, all that stuff.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, it instantly sucks you in and protects your limbs.
Yep.
But it's working along with the aircraft. So
Correct.
it knows exactly what to put pressure on and when to do it.
Yeah, and I guess-
instantaneously.
I mean, to really simplify it, it's just like it's probably way more complicated. I'm not an engineer by trade, but imagine like a metal plunger, and then you have it in this volume of air, and then as you pull G's, the G forces push down on this, which then allows airflow to come in. So the more G's you pull, the more, I guess the more that plunger drops, allow more airflow into the bladder itself. And you're doing this, people go out there and fly airplanes. You've probably seen these funny videos on social media where people are passing out in the back.
Yeah, everyone's seen those. Yeah,
I've ever seen those. So it's like these people, their only focus in life right now is to not pass out while flying a fighter jet. And you're like, okay, when you're actually in the airplane flying a fighter jet, you're doing that, but you're also working all these switches. You're like looking outside, you're contorted because you're fighting other airplanes that are trying to potentially kill you. And it's a full contact sport for sure.
Did you ever pass out in an airplane?
I've never passed out in an airplane. Thank goodness. People have, plane people have, and like everything else, if you're training for a marathon, you don't start by running a marathon. You start by running,
Sure. Yeah.
And all the airplanes we fly in the Air Force gradually build in terms of G capabilities. So the T6, the first one you fly, is about 5 to 6 Gs, and the T38 it's about 7, and then the F-22 is over 9. And it'll pull over 9. It's remarkable. It's just amazing.
Have you felt 9 Gs on your body?
Yeah. I mean, almost every air show.
Every year. Oh yeah, because you're doing crazy stuff in the shows.
Yeah, and even in like the training missions and all that stuff, all of our combat missions we're typically dropping. We're dropping bombs on our combat missions, so like dropping weapons, and that's not like very aggressive by any means. It's more of just taking information really quickly from somebody else, passing information, putting it in correctly in the airplane, and making sure you're in a position to employ the weapons. But in the air-to-air side, when we do training, there are times where you'll pull over 9 Gs for over a minute, and you're just like this. You get back, and you're like, I am smoked, And I do remember this funny story. We were doing a trip down to Florida, and that's where we do a lot of our live missile testing. So we were down there, and at the time it was the wing commander. It was Colonel Corcoran, Corky Corcoran. We went out and flew, and he went on to become a general. He's recently retired, but I was a younger guy at the time, and he's this full bird colonel, so he's been around the block quite a bit, flying airplanes. And I had this great idea. I was like, we're going to do a training mission, and we're going to go out and do some dogfighting together. And I'm like, I'm a young guy. I've got a neck that's still expendable, or I can still get some Gs. So I'm going to get into this like very aggressive, heavy G, fight with him, and we fit like. As we do this thing, I'm looking across and we're fighting, and I see him and he just matched me step for step, and it was just amazing. I was like, this guy is crushing it right now, and it was just so impressive because he is an amazing pilot, an amazing leader. I got to thankfully fly with him when I was deployed as well. He was the wing commander when I was deployed in 2016, and just an amazing human. But it was funny. I was like, I can pull some new guy tricks, just trying to sacrifice my body for an advantage, in terms of this flying and fighting. And he was right there with me the entire time.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, the stories you must have, and most of them you probably can't even tell. But the times when you're in Anchorage, that was basically patrols in the ocean. Yeah, because we've got an adversary right across that ocean from Alaska.
Yep.
And you tell me that you guys would see enemy aircraft quite a bit.
Yeah, it goes seasonally, right? There are different, whether it's political events or whether it's time of year, things will ramp up or ramp down, and and quite frankly, we're doing the same thing to other countries as well. We're flying airplanes off their coast, much like they're flying airplanes off our coast, and it's a cat and mouse game that will continue forever. And it's one of the missions we had up there. The vast majority of our missions up there were training missions to prepare for all the different mission sets we had to be responsible for. But that was one of the things where we would sit in an alert facility, and we have those facilities all around the country, and it's almost like being a firefighter, right? You live in a firehouse, you have a kitchen, you have rooms, same thing. It's, a lot of days, multiple days spent there in that facility, and some days nothing happens, and some days like you get a call at 2:00 in the morning, and it's like, oh, you should, go now. And like, I gotta go. So you run down there and get going.
So when we were in Vegas together, and we had Tater with us. Yep. How's he doing, by the way?
He's doing well. I think he's down. I haven't spoken with him, and it's probably been a bit. But last time I talked to him, he was down in Louisiana. That's where his family's from, and he was down there flying F-15s within the Louisiana Air National Guard.
So if we had recorded a podcast that night, we stayed up really late
We did.
on the tour bus in Vegas. We just played a concert. It was you and me and Tater and maybe a couple other guys. But if we had recorded that would have been the greatest podcast of all time. Because those stories were so wild. I don't even know what you could tell from that on this podcast, and feel free to not share anything. But you guys talking about your deployments and talking about the different calls as a firefighter that you would get, essentially. And there were some times when like you guys would be, and you guys had different deployments, right? I don't think you were deployed together.
We were not, no.
But these guys would get called in. I'm talking to Ammon too. They would basically get called in, and there would be something happening on the ground, and aircraft would get called in, but not to do anything, but just to be there, just in case. And so they're flying and just circling a situation, right? And just listening in and ready to go, and like knowing that they can do it. They could solve this problem right now. But the guys on the ground are trying to solve it. And they're in the air like, I can solve it. And they're like, no, hold. And they're like, okay, we'll keep holding.
It's
but hours would go by.
Yeah, we would typically do, and that kind of mission is called close air support. So the F-22 by far is not the best airplane for that mission set. We're designed for air-to-air combat and go into hurt other airplanes.
That's like an F-15, F-16 thing, right?
Yeah, an F-15E. Yeah, like the F-15E is the two-seat version of the F-15 that's optimized for air-to-ground. He was flying F-16s and then F-35, A-10. If you ask anybody on the ground, they'd probably going to tell you that the A-10 is what they would want for close air support for sure. And then in the Navy, Marine Corps, the F-18. But yeah, close air support is really you're hanging out and you're waiting to see if anything is needed, and then it goes from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour really fast, because you could be especially like over Ramadi, over Mosul, whatever it is, middle of the night, nothing's happening, and you're like, okay, I've been flying now for 6 hours in this airplane. It's been dark the entire time. And going to and from the tanker, getting gas every hour and a half, and now I'm just like, all right, I'm getting a little tired. Like, this is all right. We're just orbiting right now, and then it goes from that to people on the ground are being contacted, and then you need to be able to work with somebody on the ground to get the information that the targeting information to drop a weapon at the right time at the right place, and you're doing this all in close proximity to friendly forces. So if you mess it up, like you potentially could kill
a lot of people. Die.
Yeah, like and people on your team.
So how what kind of target can you hit from that? We'll call it the F-16. But
yeah, so the F-16, in Tater's case, he'd have a targeting pod, so he could either use laser-guided weapons, where he is using a laser from his airplane to illuminate a target, then he would drop, and that weapon would follow the laser in. Somebody else could support it with a laser. He could also drop GPS weapons, so basically just give it a GPS coordinate.
So how close of a target could he hit? How small of a box could he hit?
It's real small. Yeah.
Like
I can't.
You can't tell me how small.
I couldn't
but
give you
real.
like the resolution of the weapons themselves, but like if you wanted to put a weapon through a building window, like on the west side, third floor, you probably could do it.
It's crazy because they're telling these stories, and they're just like they're trying to find a solution on the ground, and they're like, I could do it. And they're like, no, hold. And he's like, I'm telling you, I could do it. I could end this right now.
Yeah, and then sometimes they'll also use the airplanes for like a show of force, show of presence. You can imagine if you're on the ground on the bad guy side and you see an F-16 or an A-10 or whatever it is fly overhead real fast, real low, making a lot of noise. You're just like, you think twice. You're like, maybe today's not the day for this,
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a way for us to use the airplanes to de-escalate and hopefully allow our folks just some time and space to get out of there, because our goal really with that mission set is to make sure that as many American and coalition partners can make it back to their families.
Of course.
Right. Like that's the thing. And it's, while the F-22 wasn't meant for that mission set, and it was designed for air-to-air combat. And we obviously did not get the preponderance of all the missions out there with the F-22. I really found it incredibly valuable, and I would have stayed out there for as long as they would have let me, just because it was like, man, people are going home to their families because of what we're doing, and that's important. So
when you're flying, your deployment in Iraq, did you have
Iraq and Syria? Yeah.
So where are you? Where is your airfield?
Yeah, it's in the Arabian Gulf. It would take us about an hour and a half to 2 hours to get to where we needed to be in Iraq or Syria. Yeah.
Okay. How many miles is that? It's a lot of miles.
Yeah, it's probably rough math, probably 500 miles.
Okay, so you're sitting 500 miles away somewhere.
Yeah, roughly.
You get called in. Say it's the middle of the night, like the firefighter scenario you built. Say it's midnight. You've just gotten to bed, and you get called. You got to go, and it might be a 12-hour mission.
That's for the stuff in Alaska where we're sitting to like intercept airplanes. In the Middle East, as an example, we just had 24-hour presence. So you'd be assigned. Okay, here's your whatever 3, 4, 5, 6 hour time slot that you were like.
Okay,
you're responsible for this geographic area for this long. And then when you're done with that time-wise, somebody else will replace you, and then you'll go back home. So that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes we'd be up there just orbiting, and nothing would happen.
So in Alaska, though, when you're called in at midnight, how do you prepare your body? You haven't slept. How expensive is the F-22?
I think they're saying about $150 million.
$150 million aircraft, under your control, and you haven't slept.
Yeah, they do give us amphetamines, really high quality amphetamines. So
I didn't know if you could say that on the podcast, but you said it. And that's kind of what we talked about with tour bus, like go pills. Like you got to take a meth pill basically.
So it's like a medical grade, whatever. It's like they have to keep positive control on who has it.
Of course,
whatever, because it's a controlled substance. But that's one of the ways, obviously. And then sometimes there's obviously natural adrenaline too. If you get woken up, like the funny story, we were in Alaska. This was back in 2012 when I was flying F-15 still. We were on a 2-day rotation. So every 2 days we'd be at the alert facility, and then we'd have, other folks that were either on standby or whatever it was. But then you'd have 2 days off as well. So we'd have buddies go out to the bar, and whatever. And 2:00 in the morning when the bars closed down, you'd call the alert facility as like a prank call. These guys are sleeping, and you'd prank call them like scramble, scramble, scramble. And you're like, oh, that's a joke, So I think it was January 3rd of 2012. It was somewhere around there because it was cold and snowy and dark. But the guy I was sitting alert with, Soup, we had gone to bed at 2:00 in the morning. The phone rings. And he picks it up, and he thought it was a prank.
Yeah.
And it was definitely not a prank. And you're like, oh, shoot, better get ready. So we throw our stuff on, get in the airplane, go. And you do a lot of things like load. I would just take beef jerky with me and like waters and whatever else, and keep that in the airplane because you really don't have time once that call comes in. There are some times where like they know, okay, in 3 hours we need you to be airborne. But sometimes it's like not now, but right now. And then you really have no time to get ready to go. And Soup and I took off at like 2:00 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning, somewhere around there. And I remember they like opened the alert facility doors, and there's snow plows like plowing a little pathway for our jets to go through to the runway because the snow was so bad. And we were airborne for about 12 hours. And it was.
And you don't know that it's going to be 12 hours. It might be 30 minutes.
It could be. Yeah. You have no idea how long it's going to be. So typically at about 12 hours, they'll like have somebody else come in and replace you. Roughly. Yeah, you have no idea. So you just take a bunch of water, bunch of food, and then piddle packs. You have to pee at some point. So those are pretty handy. And then you just take off and go. And we ended up, it was January, so it was dark, and we were pretty far north in Alaska. So it was just dark the entire time, except for like the last half hour of our flight where like we could actually start seeing daylight again. That was a long night for sure.
Is the aircraft monitoring you and your consciousness and your does it know if you fall asleep?
No, there's no like monitoring of you in terms of the airplane itself. There's a system in the F-22 that's helpful, and the F-16 has it, and the F-35 has it as well. It's called auto GCAS, or auto ground collision avoidance system. So what that does is that scenario we talked about earlier, like passing out as an example. If I'm fighting and pulling G's and I pass out, it may take me, 20, 30 seconds to come back to consciousness. And even when I do, like I'm probably not fully there. So now we add another 30 seconds. So potentially out for a minute. And just imagine a fighter jet pointing at the ground, going full afterburner. It's going to go real fast. So like, like that's bad. And this auto GCAS system allows the airplane to recognize, okay, you have told me I don't want to go below 1,000 feet today, as an example. If the airplane recognizes it's going to go below 1,000 feet, given the current parameters, it'll start recovering for you. That saved countless lives because I've lost good friends who have passed away because of that scenario I described. And this system is saving lives, which is amazing. So there are things like that, but in terms of like just you dozed off, went to sleep, there's nothing that, tells the airplane, like, hey, he's asleep.
Wow. I'm like really struggling with what I should ask and what I shouldn't ask. But I guess you could always just say I can't answer that. But did you end up in air-to-air combat situations?
No, the last time that, well, that's not true. That's changed recently, but the air-to-air world in terms of like fighter jets against fighter jets is not very common anymore. When you think
it doesn't
about
seem like it, no.
Yeah, World War II, we built, I think, 15,000 P-51 Mustangs, and we built 195 F-22s. So scale-wise, just very different. And these airplanes are very expensive. So if we use a $150 million airplane to shoot down, let's say China, Russia, whoever, right? I'm not forecasting
sure.
in the
enemy of some sort.
The enemy of some variety. If we shoot down with our airplanes with our $150 million airplane, that becomes a real big deal. So the stakes of like using those airplanes in that capacity are pretty high, and it sends a very big signal on the international stage. So, and also when you're in the adversary and fighting against a Raptor, they're not good odds. So you're like, that's probably not a good idea. We've had people intercept Iranian fighters, for example. It's open source. You can read about in the news of like intercepting Iranian fighters, and they had no idea they were there. They had no idea the Raptors were there. They just were on their merry way and had no idea the Raptor was just sitting right there next to them.
The Raptor just showed up next to him.
Yeah, they had no idea. So it's not common because there's such an asymmetric difference between our capabilities and most other countries out there in the world. So it's mostly been air to ground. We have intercepted, like we mentioned before, like other adversary airplanes in Alaska, in the Middle East. Intercepted, but never had to like shoot anything back and forth at each other.
So you said earlier that the F-22 was literally built for air-to-air combat.
Yep.
But yet still you haven't really used it because you haven't had to, I guess, because it was made, I guess you could say it was made so well for the purpose it was made for that no one wants to go against it.
Yeah. It's a massive deterrent for aggression, which is, and you obviously know tons of people in the military, and I think I feel pretty confident saying this is the unanimous across most people in the military. Like nobody that's gone to combat wants to go to combat in terms of like, we don't want to see loss of life. We don't want to see innocent people getting hurt like that. And that's a byproduct of combat. Like that will happen. It's happened in every historical battle where innocent people are hurt, and none of us want that. So if we can de-escalate, if we can say like, hey, our airplane is that good, probably not a good idea for you guys to try this. And it deters them from aggression, then like we win. Like we won, we got the objective accomplished, and nobody got hurt in the process, which is great. There's a fine balance there, right? My uncle pitched professionally, as a baseball player professionally for a while, and he was like, "Oh, you like flying jets?" And I was like, "I love flying jets. The F-15, F-22, amazing airplanes." So imagine being in the major leagues, being a pitcher, and being in the bullpen for 20 years, never pitching one inning. You're like, "Coach, put me in. Like, put me in, coach. I want to play." And that's kind of how the air-to-air world is, because it hasn't been used in so long because the airplanes are so good that there is this fine balance of like, I know we have amazing capabilities, but I also know like if we have to use them, if I have to use an F-22 in combat, like things have gone sideways.
Yeah, it's probably really bad.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't think about it that way.
When Tyler and I, my brother, first got into e-commerce, which is now Yee Apparel, I had no idea what I was doing. We built our website, but we didn't know how to take orders. And when we realized that was going to be something that we needed to pay the bills, we needed to get serious about that. That's when we started using Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., from household names like Mattel and GameShark to brands, just like Yee Apparel. If you're thinking about getting into e-commerce, or you're in it right now, we'll get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates you put right there on your website, and Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match, your brand's style. You can get the word out like you have a huge marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. If you are ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Granger. Go to shopify.com/Granger. Shopify.com/Granger. If you're trying to get a gift for someone that you think has everything, how about a special video message from me? It's easy to do. Go to cameo.com/Granger Smith and you put in the prompt what you want me to say. I get that message on my phone. I'll say happy birthday, happy anniversary, whatever personalized message you want me to say to whoever you want me to say it to. I send it to you and you give it to them. It's pretty cool. Go to cameo.com/Granger Smith. Yee Apparel summer launch is June 13th. This is a really good launch. We have so many new items we're excited to show you. If you want to sport that Yee Apparel, go to yee.com. Remember, the new stuff, the summer launch comes out June 13th.
You ever see anything really weird out there? Out of the
Ask about UFOs. Are you Joe Rogan?
Maybe not. We could start with just saying drones. You ever seen any like the weird lights or what do you?
No, so I haven't seen any UFOs that I'm aware of. Like I don't know. Like I haven't seen any that I'm aware of. I have seen drones flying before, and that's obviously not great because they pose a pretty significant risk to the airplanes, especially at air shows.
Oh yeah, man.
We were in Chicago. I flew the air show in Chicago in 2022, and there was a drone that happened that started flying right after our show was done. And it was just like, it stopped everything because you're like, we can't risk, obviously, all these hundreds of thousands of people in Chicago on the shoreline there, potentially get damaged because this airplane hits a drone and then it goes out of control or whatever it is. So yeah, definitely there's, it's interesting. The drone stuff is very interesting. And if you've kept track of the war in Ukraine and how that's going and progressing with how they're using commercial off the shelf, very inexpensive, like Radio Shack kind of drones, to very high effectiveness rates, it changes the dynamic quite a bit. And there's a company called Firestorm in San Diego. They're doing amazing work. And Dan is the CEO, and his team is they're making these amazing drones that are 3D printed in a shipping container that you can just drop off and print these things on the front line. Our service members can have very little training to be able to operate these. They click together like Legos. They're very, very awesome. So I think we're adapting to that drone fight. I don't think anybody realized how widespread it was going to be until we saw it unfold in Ukraine and Russia and realized hey, things are changing and we need to change with them.
So that it's typically always in history, it's certain conflicts that push forward a certain technology.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, for us, I think in some ways very fortunate that we get to see this unfold somewhere else. And we're not involved in terms of directly involved with it. Obviously we've given funds and et cetera, but being directly involved, we're not having to learn that lesson and pay with American blood, if you will. I think one of the problems we have with really anything, but I think military specifically, and it's a higher stake, I think, in that scenario, is we plan for the last war. We don't plan for the next war. And what I mean by that is you look at the F-22 as an example, amazing airplane. It competed against the YF-23 at the time, which I don't have all the data for, but looking at the airplane, it appeared to be more stealthy. It was a bigger airplane, appeared to carry more weapons, more fuel, all these things. And we went with the F-22 specifically because it was very maneuverable, and there were other couple factors as well. But it was the super cool maneuverable fighter jet that the generals were we just finished the Cold War. This is what we want. We want this really cool maneuverable fighter jet, and it's amazing. It absolutely is amazing. But they were thinking about how do we fight the Cold War in Europe? We don't need these massive distances to be covered. We need, high performance, short distance kind of fighter. And the F-22 is all those things. When you look at the fight in Asia, General Hawk Carlyle talked about it in The Tyranny of Distance and how unless you've been to Asia, you have no idea how vast it is. It is huge. You go from Anchorage to Japan's 10 hours, another 10 hours to get to Australia. These are massive distances. And when you think about that airplane, what would be helpful for that? It may or may not be the F-22, but we were planning for the previous conflict, not planning for the next one. So I think in the drone scenario, we're seeing it unfold elsewhere, and we're able to plan for what we foresee happening in the future. We're skating to the puck as opposed to waiting for the puck where we're at,
Yeah.
Which I think is good. And hopefully we'll will help us if, knock on wood, nothing happens, but if it does happen, we'll be more prepared than we would be otherwise.
And how close are we for unmanned aircraft to be the main aircraft?
I don't know how close we are to that. I think we'll have
Is that why you got
unmanned
out? Be
teams.
honest. Is that why you got out?
That's why I got out. 100%. I'm just kidding.
You saw the writing on the wall?
Yeah. I think we'll do unmanned teams for a while. There are airplanes, there are programs out there, CCA, which is basically a companion aircraft that goes with a manned fighter aircraft. And I think that'll be good. I think, I think fundamentally there's a trust element, right? Especially with airplanes. Can you imagine 200 people getting on a Delta airplane with no pilot?
Not right now. I can't.
Not right now, right? People just trust
no.
factor. It's like, I don't trust it. But like in terms of scale, you have people getting their Teslas full self-driving and just going down the road, no care in the world.
Yeah.
So they're trusting a computer to operate a car, but they won't trust it to operate an airplane. And I think it's the same thing when we transpose that to military aviation, where it's like, I know the computer's gonna do a great job. It's all these things, but if there's the decision of taking or preserving life that needs to be made, I want a human making that decision. I don't want a computer making that decision. And I think that's going to be the hurdle that we have to overcome over time. And I think eventually we'll get there. And the phrase I've heard is like human on the loop, as opposed to like human in the loop, where I'm actively making decisions, where I'm just like human on the loop, monitoring what's happening. And then if I have to step in, I will, but otherwise I'm just gonna let it do its thing. And I think it'll be an evolution of that. But I think for manned fighters, we'll have them for a while longer. I don't know how long that's going to be, but I think in the future of combat, if our adversaries are not using manned fighters, we potentially could be at a disadvantage if we continue to.
That's a good point.
Because it's all, a computer's going to do things that you and I would not think make any sense.
Yeah.
If you and I are in airplanes, we're fighting and duking it out, at no point would you consider just running your airplane into my airplane. But a computer may be like, well, here's how much gas I have. Here's how far it is to get home. I don't have enough gas to get home. The next logical thing for me to do is to use this airplane to run into that airplane to take out of the fight.
Yeah.
And you're just like, you're fighting this thing.
That's
and that's just a thing you would never consider as a human being.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
So I just think, there will be a natural evolution of things, and we either adapt or we don't. And obviously my vote is on adapting. So
Why did you get out?
a variety of reasons. Quite a few, actually. I was very thankful for the time I had in. I did about 15 years and 2 months active duty, and then I'm still serving part-time in the Nevada Air National Guard. There were a couple of things Air Force-wise, like structurally and like leadership-wise, like culture-wise, that I just was not super keen on. And to me, the next path for me, active duty-wise, was to go be in charge of different squadrons. I was running the F-22 demo team, which is amazing. It's like 14 people. You have almost 100% autonomy on the road. You're in charge of $300 million worth of airplanes and these people to go travel around the globe to do this show. It's like, I'd imagine it's like being on tour where you're like, every weekend you're gone somewhere new, doing this show and talking to people and this whole thing. And that was amazing. And the leadership side of that I thought was really impactful, because you connect with people on a personal level, and you're on the road. You see, the stressors that happen with people being on the road away from their families for a long period of time. And you have to like help solve those things while also having a mission, balancing that. And you have a lot of autonomy. If the airplanes break, like, it's up to you and your team if they either get fixed on time or not. And turns out most Air Force bases in the States don't work on Saturdays and Sundays. It's usually Monday through Friday thing. So when you have an air show on the weekends and your part breaks, you're like, well, shoot, we got to figure out a way to get a part. And that has included me and the superintendent at the time driving 15 hours to meet somebody halfway to pick up a part, to then drive back to South Padre Island, Texas, to fix it, and then fly the show the next day. But those problem solving skills, I think, were amazing. So I was very thankful that I had that experience. Going on, though, there were some things that I just had reservations about, and being then put into a responsibility position of a squadron as an example. It was like, I can't in good conscience say these things and do these things if I don't feel aligned with that. That was just a moral conflict for me, of internal conflict. I would say it was like, there's things I'm like, I'm not really on board here.
Is there an example, or can you not side? I mean, I could respect if you don't want to.
Yeah, I don't want to jump into it too much, because I'm still in the Air Force in some capacity. I do think there was to, I guess, make it as simple, like I guess as generic as possible, I feel like our focus went away from killing things and breaking stuff. And across all services, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Space Force, Coast Guard, like, you know, all these, like that's at the root of it, like that is our job. We don't want to ever have to do it, right? We don't want to
Killing stuff and breaking stuff.
Well, it's like, you know, national defense, right?
Yeah. I got you.
So like that is our job at the end of the day.
Okay.
And there were some things that detracted from that. And it's a zero-sum game. We either spend time getting really good, hoping that we never have to use it, or we spend time on a lot of other things. And then when we actually are tested, we're not good enough. And
that is terrifying to hear you say that.
That impacts everybody across the country, you know, and the vast majority of my family moved here from Cuba. They came here with second and third grade educations, 3 kids, didn't speak the language, got here, worked incredibly hard, and provided a life for their family. And I'm so incredibly thankful to be born here. And I love this country a lot. Like it's just the land that provides so many opportunities for so many countless people, and has done so for decades and decades and decades. So to me, like I want to make sure that I'm in line with leaving this place better than how I found it. And now that I have, you know, an 8-week-old little dude, I want to make sure that I leave this place better than, you know, better for him as well as he grows up. And so there were some conflicts I had in terms of where we were going as an organization. And then also a really good friend of mine, Brian Phillips, he flies F-15s. He asked me when I first started the demo team job, he was like, hey man, this is a 2-year thing. You have a really interesting story. Your folks, you know, vast majority of family moved here from Cuba. You grew up, your first language was Spanish. You know, you go to the Air Force Academy, you've lost both parents, lost a sister. Like all these things have happened to you in your life, but you've still found a way to be successful. It's like, you should really consider like what is important to you and what do you want to look back at when you're 80 years old? Like, what do you want to be proud of? And I don't really get hung up on the word legacy a whole lot, because to me, legacy is somewhat ego driven. It's like,
sure,
how is the world going to, like, you know, view me? And I realized in 2-3 generations, nobody's gonna know my name and it's not going to matter to anybody at that point in time.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you impact the people around you and how do they change and live their lives as a result of your impact? And it could be negative or positive, but like that impact is like an internal, like, I know I had a positive effect on somebody, and that positive effect, I don't even know what's going to happen. Like, I don't know how it's going to propagate the next generations. I have no idea, but I know it's a good impact and I'm happy with that. Right. And when I'm 80, like, what am I going to be proud of and happy about? So I thought about that. And part of that is really, how do I shape the next generation of American youth to leave this place better than I found it? And there are a couple lines of effort. There's a 5, 10, 15-year game plan for this, because I think it's a thing that I want to commit to for a long time. In the near term, going to start off with basically a flying podcast, and we're going to do take people up in an aerobatic airplane that goes up and sit down, all those things. And I think there's something magical about flight, where if you've never flown an airplane and you go up there and I let you fly it, like, I'm flying this airplane. I didn't think I could do it before, but now I'm doing it, and I'm upside down. I'm doing these things, right? But you have a conversation about, really, it's focused on younger adults. So 18 to 25 is the demographic I'm looking at. And I really want to find really impressive young adults who've overcome hard things and how they used faith, family, the military, working out, academia. Like, there are tons of things they could have used to get past that obstacle in their life. But what do they use? How do they use it? And how can we share that information to other young kids that are, 15 years old? And ultimately, like, there could be a 60-year-old person out there who's incredibly successful and could have come from the exact same circumstances. However, it's not relatable anymore, And I realized as a 38-year-old guy, like, I'm not relatable to a 15-year-old kid anymore. I remember when I was going to college, some of my instructors were like my age. And I was like, dude, like, are they kicking the bucket next week? I don't know. Like, they look pretty old. Yeah. And now I'm that person, right? And it's like, okay, I'm not relatable to a 15-year-old anymore. But if I find somebody that demographically, age-wise, is close to them, like that's how we meet them where they're at. We find somebody that speaks their language, understands the way they grew up. A 60-year-old spent 2/3 of their life without the internet, without cell phones. Yeah. Like, what was that like? And you have to go back and pull back some memories to remember what that was like. And kids nowadays have no idea what that was like. So how do you relate to them in a way they understand, in a way that's impactful, in a way that can help them change the vector of their life, into a positive way? So That's the first line of effort. There's some other stuff later on, but that'll be the first line of effort.
It sounds like there's a lot kind of going on behind the curtain.
Yeah, there's a lot of
find
stuff.
out.
Yeah. And I'm very excited, but that was one of the main driving factors as well. And in addition to what I mentioned about the Air Force in general, like that's one of the big factors for me that I just looked at the 5 years of time. Like, yeah, the easy button is to stay in the military for 5 more years, get my retirement, and like go off to other things. And I just thought, well, it's 5 years of opportunity cost that I'm missing, that I could be doing something else.
Yeah, I respect that.
Impacting other people in a positive way. And life takes these twists and turns, and get married, have a little kid. Like, it's just, life's been,
How life has a way of doing that.
it does, and you appreciate it for the twists and turns, and sometimes there are things that happen, like whether it's serious stuff or inconsequential stuff. From the time I was a little kid, I wanted to fly F-15s. At pilot training, there were no F-15s available, to the point where, like, on my dream sheet of like what I want to fly, I put down F-15 1 through like 26 or whatever it was. My flight commander looked at me. He was an F-15 guy, and he was like, dude, this is hilarious. I appreciate it because I love the F-15 too, but you have to give me other options. And I was like, okay, F-15, A-10, and then I don't care whatever happens next. There were no F-15s available, but there were A-10s available. So I got an A-10 out of pilot training, actually, and then 4 months go by, and there were 2 guys that wanted A-10s that got F-15s. There was some switch that happened, and ended up flying F-15s. But my point with that is, like, had I gone to F-15Es or F-16s, I never would have flown the F-15, which is the airplane I wanted to fly since I was a little kid. I would have never flown the F-22, never done the demo job, wouldn't be where I'm at right now. Like, unfortunately, like there are things in life that just don't go our way at the time. And we're like, I don't understand why. And slowly they'll reveal themselves to you. And it sometimes takes a lot of time. Sometimes it takes 4 months.
Do you have a faith?
I do. I was raised Roman Catholic, probably like most
Everybody in Cuba.
Yeah.
So, then I've been to Cuba.
Yeah, I have not been, actually. I really want to go for multiple reasons. I can't go right now. One, affiliation with the military, obviously, and 2, there's some just like, I don't want that government to have a single cent of my money. It's kind of that. My grandfather he was a mechanic for like 50 years of his life, and he only ever bought Craftsman tools. He was like, if it's not made in America, I don't want it. And this is a guy that wouldn't even drink vodka. He's like, that's a communist drink. You're like, like, this was made in Sweden. He's like, I don't care. And he's just very principled in that way. And but yeah, I would love to go visit. But yeah, so I was raised Roman Catholic growing up, and continue that faith. And I think living around the globe has exposed me to a lot of other religions. And one of the things that I've found, at least my interpretation, is that there's so many common threads across the major religions on the globe. Like, at the end of the day, like, what do I still read? I still read the Bible. That's the text I choose to read. But there's so many common threads, and I feel like religion in some capacities has gotten people in a place where they're like, well, they're not they don't believe the way I believe, so therefore it must be at conflict. And there's so many things about being a good human. There's like, just even the 10 Commandments. Like, there's so many things that are just common threads about being a good human, taking care of your neighbor, taking care of your family, that I deeply appreciate. I think the thing that just has, I guess, bothered me, not about my specific faith in religion, but just about globally, is like how people use religion as a weapon to hurt other people. And that, to me, is a travesty.
I stand in line with that as well. It's horrible. Yeah. For people to take that, I mean, it's if you believe there's a God, then you would believe there's also an adversary to God.
Yep.
And it's only from the adversary that to use God as a weapon. I mean, that's not an argument against religion. That's a testament to there is a God.
Yep.
Because there wouldn't be so much controversy over it if there wasn't. But there's obviously a force pushing against it. Have you ever been in a cockpit at a time and looked up into the stars and just thought about your smallness? I mean, surely you've been in places on this globe where no other human has been.
Yeah, I have. And I do want to address the point you mentioned just now, because I think it's an important one, where I think a lot of folks in the military who either raised in some religious capacity, they go to the military and they see horrible things. I have friends from high school that enlisted in the Army, enlisted in the Marines, and have seen horrible things. And it makes them question their faith because they're like, well, how can this happen if there's a God?
Yeah.
And I think you brought up a great point where it's like, there's a counterforce there. I mean, Romans 12:21, I think, is an important one. Like, it's just like, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And it lets you know there's a balance there. There is a good and a bad. And you have to understand that there are bad things that happen, but there are also good things that happen. And there's this balance there, and you have to choose. And I choose the good, and I say that because I've met a lot of folks in the military who have lost their faith as a result of their service. And it's been disheartening to see, for sure.
I understand that. But logically, and I continue to go back on this podcast to like the logical argument, but to say something evil happened, therefore I cannot believe there's a God, is going from one worldview to another one, and the other worldview that they go to also doesn't have an answer to evil either.
Yep.
If we're all just, come from pond scum and we've all evolved, then the problem of evil is not solved with that either. There's still an evil that we can't explain that happens within the human heart that wants to kill and steal and destroy other humans. And just from a pure scientific evolutionary background, that doesn't explain it either. In fact, I think it makes least sense from an atheist perspective. It makes more sense if you say there is a God, and there is a purpose, and there is a way, and there is an adversary, and just as in any great movie or any great novel, there is no story unless there are two forces that are counteracting each other.
Yeah, and like you said, there is an adversary, and I wish there were more. Obviously, this is hope, and hope's not a good game plan. But I wish more people from multiple faiths realize there is a common good, there is common ground, and while we may believe slightly differently, like there is good and there's evil, and there's good in all of us, and there's bad in all of us. Like it's just there's this fighting force, right? That we have to contend with and have to choose. So yeah, I think that's been my biggest, the biggest thing that I've seen, at least traveling around the globe, is like a little bit concerning of like how it can go back 2,000 years, how it's been the case where we use religion in a negative way to hurt people, and it's like, shoot, man, like this is not meant for that,
To ever think that from a biblical perspective. Now there are other religions that would definitely advocate for violence.
Yep.
But to read the Bible and to end up at the very end of Revelation, at the end of the New Testament, and to close it and go, well, I'm going to fight to kill some people, then you need to go back and start over again.
Yeah.
You've completely missed it.
Yep.
Completely. When Jesus says, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, turn the other cheek. To see a man at the epicenter of the Christian faith, to see a man on a cross being killed and praying to the Father saying, forgive them, they know not what they do. And the very act of him dying on that cross is to forgive the men that were killing him. Mm-hmm. To take that idea and to think that means we should go to war for this is a complete atrocity misunderstanding
100%
of what Jesus came to do and say to bring his people to God.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, I took us on a tangent. And
no,
I
I'm glad
you
you
had a question.
I'm glad you did. But from a pilot's perspective.
Oh yeah, you asked me if I've ever
And actually, don't want to go there yet.
Okay.
Because now I wanted to say one more thing to this conversation. There's the whole Epicurus idea of, and what's happening to your buddies is, it's the Epicurus idea of, if there is a God, and he is all powerful, then why doesn't he stop evil? Mm-hmm. And if he's not, then he's malevolent. If he doesn't want to stop it, then he's malevolent. If he can't stop it, then he's not all powerful.
Yeah.
But the problem is that there still is evil. So that means there must not be a God. But that's wrong thinking, because there is another option to this. If we believe there is a God, and he is all powerful, and he is all knowing, and he is good. Okay, because if he was all powerful and evil still existed, that means he would be bad, unless he allowed evil for the purpose of good. And that's the part that's never understood. What if God is working for a greater good all along, and for the accomplishment of a greater good, evil does exist so that it could be overcome? And we see this, you'll know this in just a few years with your boy, as you have to discipline him. Or if he does, or there's going to be times when you let him get into trouble on purpose so that he sees the lesson of the greater good.
Yeah.
but you've never left him. You always know what's going on. You're always there for his good. But the existence of evil doesn't automatically mean either there is no God or God's bad.
Yeah.
Because what people often forget is he can allow evil for a greater good.
Yeah, and I think that's a great analogy, the way you described it with like, raising a sound, letting him get into trouble. And like, the stove's hot, bud. Like, hopefully you don't get burned too bad. Badly, but
I say this a lot, and people, I could put it this way. What if I told you right now, Josh, like, I do something to my kids. I will take one of my boys to another man, and that other man will pin him down and hurt him. And there has been times when he even cries, my boy will cry. And you'd go, Granger, evil, man.
Jiu-jitsu?
Well, no. But I will pay that man to do this. And you'll say, you are sick. And I'll say, I'm talking about the dentist.
Yeah. Well, I thought jiu-jitsu, but
but yeah, jiu-jitsu actually works. But I know that this is going to hurt him.
Yeah.
I know that he might think it's evil in the moment when he's 6 years old. But I also have in mind good teeth because I have the good result because I want the good for him. And he has no idea about good teeth or why he needs to sit in this chair and be pinned down. And this guy's got these knives basically sticking him into his mouth. He hates it.
Yeah.
And that's the bad example, but it's still a small example that evil or bad could exist if there is a greater good that will accomplish at the end of it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I agree. Like, I agree with you for sure.
I know you do. I'm just talking kind of out loud for your buddies because I understand the sentiment. Military guys see it all the time. Like, I see evil, so I'm out. There is no God to me. And I go, well, your new worldview doesn't answer the evil's still there. You've denied God and rejected him. Okay, I understand that. But you didn't pick a new world that doesn't have evil. You still have the same problem. You didn't solve anything.
Yeah.
But anyway, these are common things. So back to the cockpit now.
Yeah.
Have you ever been there like on a night like you're describing in Alaska and you're just there by yourself and had a moment maybe?
I think one of the I guess two funny stories and a serious one. So the first funny story was on that same mission with Soup when I was like 12 hours over Alaska. We have these anti-exposure suits as well. So you have these like rubber necks and seals around your feet and all that stuff to keep you from, if you had to eject and get into cold water, like you're going to at least survive maybe 15 minutes, longer than you would have otherwise to hopefully get rescued. Yeah. Somehow in Alaska, middle of nowhere, but different topic. So you're wearing these things. I take one of those Go pills. I don't remember if I told you this story in Vegas at all, but I remember taking the Go pill. We're on the tanker. So the tanker is like a mobile gas station. Effectively, we're swapping out, getting gas. Okay. And I look at Soup's airplane and I start seeing like these colors, right? And I just take the Go pill. I'm like, is something happening to me because I just took this amphetamine? Like, what is going on? I'm like pulling the seal. And then I realized it was the Northern Lights, which was awesome. And it was like just amazing, this amazing backdrop, and I was like, holy cow, that's super cool. But for a second there, I had a little bit of panic. And then there was another night where on the night vision goggles, I was at like 50,000 feet. And when you have the night vision goggles on and you're that high and you look up in the stars, the amount of stars you can see and just the vastness of and just puts in perspective how small we are, or even like flying over New York City. You look down and you're like, there are millions of people with millions and millions of problems down there. And I have no idea what any of those are because I'm up here and I see it from a different perspective. And I think astronauts kind of like have the same kind of idea where they see no borders. They see just the globe because their perspective is different.
Yeah.
Wow. But I guess the serious one was, I was in Alaska, flying F-22s, and I came back and had a catastrophic landing gear problem. So this is actually, I think, before I met you. It's October of 2018, and the left main landing gear collapsed through like a mechanical failure. So actually, I didn't recognize at the time. I thought it was another problem because the airplane was landing and it was still somewhat controllable. Then it eventually stopped being controllable. The left wingtip hit the runway, threw me off in the grass, and I was actually like, I think I'm the only person to take an F-22 like ATVing, but like in the dirt, bounce around, and it's just Earl Dibbles just hanging out with me, But there's a small building in front of me, so I like to like get the airplane back in the air after off-roading a little bit, and I missed that building by like 10 feet or less. So I think about when I relate it back to faith and like why that's important. Everything had to happen at the right time. So the failure had to happen when it did. The airplane had to go off the runway when it did. My decision making had to happen when it did. The engine had to like spool up from like idle thrust to full afterburner when they did, which doesn't happen. It doesn't happen like instantaneously. It takes some time. My responsiveness had to happen just so that I didn't hit this building. And if you think about the consecutive minor miracles that had to happen for me to survive that scenario, like the list is long. And I had just lost my mom the year before. So to me, like I definitely believe in God. And I also believe there are other things out there, whether it's my mom, my grandfather, who's a massively influential person in my life, who passed away 18 years ago now. But it's like, I know I'm a good pilot, but I'm not that good, right? There are all these things that had to have happened just so that led to an outcome where I survived. Like I said, I'm good. And my skill and all those things is simply a byproduct of the amazing instructors and teachers that I had along the way, like, mentored me and helped guide me. And that's what developed
which was
this skill.
Also out of your control. Mentorship.
Mentorship, like who were my instructors going up to that point? I had I've been flying airplanes for 10 years, like fast jets for about 10 years at that point. So those people are out of my control. Like there were so many things out of my control that happened in a way that allowed me to survive, and I'm incredibly thankful for that. And then for the next couple months, I'm flying back home after a training mission, and the distance from the airport in Anchorage to the training airspace is pretty far. So it's probably like a 15-minute commute, if you will.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of time to think. And, you just think about that, and you think about, man, had something gone slightly differently, I would have just like been gone, and ceased to exist. But all these minor miracles happened in a way that allowed me to live and survive. I'm incredibly thankful for that. I think that's anytime you have like a near-death experience, you reflect on that, and going back to the military example, you have people that, when they're in a really bad spot, like people pray. It's like, well, you can't tell me 1 second that you don't believe there's God because there's evil. And then when you're faced with mortality, you're praying.
You're praying.
Like there's a conflict there in terms of ideas. But yeah, I was incredibly thankful, and it just reaffirmed my beliefs, and also reaffirmed that like there is a bigger plan, bigger picture out there that I'm not aware of. And
now here you are, married, have a little boy.
Yep.
That you now have because you didn't crash into that building that day.
Yeah.
So let's take that scenario.
Yeah.
And then run it back through the test that we just did. Because this same God that performs the miracles to save you and to correct all the, would you say, micro miracles, all the small miracles that happened in order for you to not hit that building. He's also the same God that allowed the landing gear to malfunction.
Yep.
So think about it that way. This same God, it would have been easier in our minds to think,
just never let it happen in the first place.
Let the landing gear come out normal.
Yeah.
Then none of this happens. But then you and I are not having this conversation. You're not reflecting on it. There is no gratefulness or thankfulness in your heart that you're thinking about because of the miracles. And so by allowing the evil really of the malfunction of the landing gear, this is a small example to someone who's some of your buddies that have lost somebody or had seen death. So we don't want to compare the two. Yeah. But it's still
Big idea.
It's the same idea that the malfunction of the aircraft and the continued events was the same God allowed them, the same God fixed them, the same God corrected it, and now the same God is drawing in your heart to reflect on it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. God is not a boring being.
Yeah.
like you don't sit here and go, man, I've been flying all these years and everything was perfect.
Yeah.
No one goes, yeah, I've never I've never lost anybody in my family. Mom, dad, still grandpa, great grandpa, everyone's still alive. Like no one says that.
Yeah.
We walk through life as wounded soldiers, really, just event after event. And God could have stopped all of it. And then we just would have, what do? We end up in his presence just like, hey, what's up, man? Thanks, God.
Yeah.
No, we go to him and just go, it was you. You had me all the whole time. For some reason, the plan that he had is for us to walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and there is no other way than to go through that valley. That's where we go. That's the path that humans take, and no one's immune from it. Religious or not, believe in God or not, everyone still walks that valley of the shadow of death. Some people walk it alone, and some people walk it with him. That's the only difference.
Yeah.
So what was happening in my mind, though, is I was thinking, you took back off, you missed the building. That only temporarily solved the problem.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
So I get airborne. Obviously, I knew something was catastrophically wrong. I had no idea what it was.
That's the word, catastrophic.
Yeah, it was catastrophic for sure. So we come back around, and we don't do anything by ourselves as fighter pilots. We have a team of people that help us, whether in other airplanes or on the ground, and flew down the runway, had the people in the control tower look with the binoculars, and they're like, everything looks fine, because the component that failed really, nothing got bound up. It was just like not supporting the weight. So imagine like I, put the gear down, there's something in the middle that's broken. It's just not supporting the weight of the airplane anymore. So to like summarize it, they look at nothing's wrong. And we elect to, I basically elect to take a cable, which is like you saw in Top Gun where they land on the ships, cable. So I just take a cable and land the airplane that way. So the left gear, collapsed again. The wingtip hits the runway, but I was in the cable, at least caught it. There were some things I had to do to make that happen, but it slowed me to a stop and get out of the airplane. It was funny because the crash fire rescue guys show up. There's this big cloud of dust. Thankfully, nothing was on fire. It was good.
Yeah.
And crash fire rescue guys show up, and they saw that last part. They didn't see the first like off-roading bit and like get airborne again. It's like, sir, are you okay? Like they had missed the whole thing. And I was like, yeah, dude, I'm fine. This jet is not good. It's just pretty messed up. But yeah, that was an interesting event,
So now your new mission
yeah,
is to figure out why the Lord saved you in that time in 2018 for this moment.
yeah. It's a question I ask myself a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful
You don't have
that
to answer it
Brian-
now. I'm not putting pressure
Yeah.
on you.
Well, I don't think
But
it's.
we could talk. We could talk
yeah.
about it on text
Yeah,
after you leave here.
We sure can.
As you go back to Vegas.
Yeah, sure can. I think it's just this constant pursuit of like how do I live in a worthy way? How do I help others around me? How do I live a good life? And and we've all made mistakes. We've all had like everybody's sinned. Everybody's had mistakes. Everybody's done all these things. Every single person. So the fact that we have a compassionate God that is willing to accept you for those faults and sees that you're making amends and working in a positive direction to fix things, like that's pretty. I'd rather be on his team,
Yeah, he does. And the Bible says, the New Testament will say very clearly that he accepts you on one ground, and that's his son. That's what John 3:16 should be read as. God so loved the world, he gave his only son so that whoever believes in him.
Yeah.
So he's compassionate because he provided a way. He gave a way for guilty sinners that have rejected him. Like you said, everybody in the world has rejected him, and he gave a way for those sinners to be reconciled to him through his son, who went to the cross and died the death that we deserved, saying, look to him and you'll be forgiven. That's the greatest story ever told.
And I'm really excited to kind of go through that journey again with my son as he grows up, like to see it from his eyes, to see it through his eyes and see it from that perspective. And I'm sure he'll ask thousands of questions, and you're just like, I never thought about it that way. Let's think about that, and like,
I know,
I'm
man.
just excited to go on that journey. And
Fatherhood teaches you a lot about your relationship with the Father. Absolutely.
Yeah. We're very grateful and very excited. This next chapter, the previous chapters were good. The jets were great, but man, I just want to be home and hang out with him and not do anything. Like my goal is to make every baseball practice, every jiu-jitsu match, every music, recital. Like I just want to be at all the things.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And you'll even take him to the dentist occasionally.
Occasionally. Yeah.
Hey, I want to finish with one thing.
Yeah.
randomly, I saw this morning.
Uh-oh.
I follow it like my daily news,
Uh-huh.
and I was reading it. I was like really early this morning, and I actually texted him, Ant-Man. But I was like, this is an interesting headline. I wish I could discuss this with somebody. Wait a minute.
Oh, wait a second.
Josh is going to be on it.
Is it
The headline is this: U.S. Navy loses a $60 million jet at sea after it fell overboard from the aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
Did you read this?
I did see that, yeah.
Because he did the ship captain did a maneuver, and it literally threw the jet off the side. Have you ever heard of this?
I have. I mean, I imagine there's some, like, because they tie them down as well. So I'm not sure if it was tied down properly, if it was improperly tied down. I have no idea.
What?
Obviously, I don't speak on behalf of the Navy as the Air Force, but it's just a tragic event. Like, it's like, holy cow, like, we lost an airplane that is very difficult to replace. Thankfully nobody was hurt, right? But
And so evidently,
yeah.
along with Pharaoh's chariot, it's at the bottom of the Red Sea.
Wow. Pharaoh's chariot.
With the Egyptian chariots, it sits along with an F-18 Super Hornet. Do they go down there and try to get anything?
I'm sure there'll be some recovery efforts of different pieces, like they're classified elements. I'm sure they'll try to collect. I don't know. I didn't fly F-18, so I'm not sure what exactly is on that airplane that they'll need to recover. But anytime we lose a sensitive asset, we'll try to recover as much as we can.
So they'll send divers down there to get the computer assets and.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they'll get, but they'll send some rescue teams down there. So many laugh. You said the Pharaoh's chariot. I was laughing because we were. Lisa and I were having this conversation the other day. We were like, "Oh, what's your favorite like animated movie?" And she was like, listening to some stuff, from like the '90s. And I was like, "Prince of Egypt." And you're saying Pharaoh's chariot. I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay, that's good."
Mean, can you imagine this moment?
Yeah.
It must have just been like slow motion. Just like I think it's going.
Yeah.
The jet is going off the side, and it just.
Yeah. Well, there are videos from like Vietnam where they're pushing airplanes and helicopters off the carriers
That's right.
because they couldn't come back with them. I haven't heard of anything where like it was an unintentional like oopsie daisy. That's a pretty big oopsie daisy. And I'm curious to see what happens.
There's always more to the story, though. You probably saw headlines of something you were involved with, and you're like, yeah, that wasn't the whole story.
For sure.
Like this just says that there was fire, the enemy fire, or a threat, and so the captain turned the ship too hard,
Okay.
and the ship tilted, and an F-18 falls in the water. There has to be a little bit more that we don't know.
Because you've probably seen videos of like carriers, especially like the Bering Sea, and like they're just pitching up and down, and there's water coming over the deck of the ship that's like washing over the ship. And like, well, if they didn't lose an airplane on the carrier deck under that, then how do they lose it here? There has to be more to the story. So like that's why it's hard to chuck spears until we get the full story,
Well, there's the answer. That's the answer we needed. Bro, thank you so much,
Thank you.
man.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure catching up.
Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah. I was going, definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining me on the Granger Smith podcast. I appreciate all of you guys. You could help me out by rating this podcast on iTunes. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to this channel, hit that little like button and notifications bell so that you never miss anytime I upload a video. Yee yee.